For those who haven't attended before, we have any new attendees. My name is Brian Boteo. I'm a planner with the Fairfax County Department of Planning and Development. And this is the West Falls Church TSA Task Force. We're going to continue discussing the draft plan amendment tonight that we published back in December. And that will be followed by a public Q&A comment period for those folks who are attendees. We'll explain a little later how you're able to participate at that time. But this is also to remind everybody that if you are not the active speaker, to please mute your microphone so we can cut down on background noises and feedback and whatnot. So with that being said, David, we can start with the adoption of the January 5th and January 19 meeting minutes before moving on to continue discussing the draft plan amendment.
Okay. I know that you had made some changes, and including some that I sent to you late in the day. I found that in the minutes of the 19th, there was one that I missed. Do you remember I had said several of them seem to have ended in this wording about subject to the following conditions, and I didn't notice that the very last one, which is the top of page 3, also had that in it.
Okay, we'll remove that.
I'm assuming that doesn't belong there, just like with the other ones.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Other than that, that's all I've got. I don't know if anybody else has any. Does anybody else have any questions or comments on the minutes changes I think are warranted?
Motion to approve.
Anybody want to second that?
Second.
Okay.
Wait, I have a question. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
So both of those where it says subject to the following condition, that's just being struck. That's not, there were no conditions. Is that what?
Yeah, that was.
Because I was going to ask what are the conditions?
No, that was mistakenly left in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there are a few things that are like patched together and from other things. So.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else have a point? Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. I'll assume that everybody is in favor unless you say no or raise your hand. And I'm not seeing any objections. Anybody want to abstain? I'm not seeing that. So that's 8-0 because we don't. Oh, Paul is here. Hi, Paul. You're on now. Did you? I'm not sure exactly when you joined. Did you hear that we were approving the minutes? Paul?
Yes, yeah. I did hear.
Okay, fine. So you're okay with them too, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, good. All right. So I think we've done that. Now we can move on if you wish, Brian. So should we proceed with the you have no other announcements, right? We'll go right into the draft plan amendment.
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
And we were on page.
Yeah, I think I can. Yeah. So everybody, what we've done is over the last 2 sessions, to remind you, we've been going through all this text, and we had gone through page 17, line 22, with a number of notable deferments on things. And before we go any further, I think we need to particularly focus on the issue we debated for quite a while last time, where Paul had some suggested language that would have gone on page 11, I believe, and would have been a second paragraph for number 3 on page 11. I think you'll all remember that after the debate, Brian said staff would try to prepare, or Ben would try to prepare some language, and we would see if that would be acceptable instead. And Paul agreed to withhold action on his motion until we received that language, which I think we all did the other day. So I'll ask all of you, but in particular, I'll ask Paul. I sort of gathered from email that I saw that you're satisfied with this language. Is that correct?
Yes, there was one change today where they put in the word safe,
Right, right.
and with that, it's fine.
Okay, so we can consider that your motion of last time is effectively withdrawn,
Yes,
subject to, incorporating this language. Okay,
yes.
that's great. Thank you for that. And also, Brian, thank you for putting the work into the language. So, I would like to first turn to that language then, because we need to get this language in. Brian has, you all would have received this a few days ago, January 30th, I guess. So I think you've all seen it. There are like three inserts here. The first two of which really deal with the subject that we were discussing about the pedestrian safety and all that. Just so you know where they should go. The first really long one that says addition of an active transportation section that's headed West Falls Church Active Transportation Plan should go in, if you've all got your copies of the marked up plan changes, that should go on page 4. Right before, I wrote it near at the bottom of the page, right before pedestrian circulation recommendation, after the very short paragraph that says implementation and phasing of transportation improvements. Right, that goes there, and I think I should deal with both of these two together. The second one is essentially a modification of the existing number 3 that's on page 11. That it was the subject of the debate last time. The only thing that's been changed, you'll see, is this sentence saying off-site transportation improvements that accommodate safe access to the metro rail station should be strongly encouraged, not considered, as originally it's been changed to encouraged. And I think the other strikeouts at the end of that sentence were previous strikeouts that have been recommended. So I think I'd like to know if anybody's got any discussion of this material, because I don't know, maybe we should start with, does somebody want to make a motion to incorporate these at this point and second it, and then we can discuss them?
I'll make a motion to incorporate it.
Okay, so anybody second it?
I'll second it.
Okay, now does anybody want to discuss either of these long paragraphs and their placement in here? I'm not hearing anything so far. Right. If that's the case, let's take a vote. I'm going to assume that everybody is in favor of this, unless we got somebody who needs to be muted. I'm not sure who. Unless I hear a negative, I'm going to assume that everybody is accepting this. If you want to vote nay or abstain, please let me know. I am not seeing any hands and nobody's speaking up. So I think we can say that those two paragraphs carry unanimously and will be inserted where I indicated. The last one on here we should get to right away anyway, even though it's not a different subject, because it's in an area that we've actually already gone past. This is just a line saying, construct visual cues to indicate transitions from commercial to residential areas, such as tree plantings, landscaping, and signage. Brian informs me that ought to go like page 15, 16. Brian, do you have a specific place where you want it to be? Where you think it ought to be?
When we come back to the task force with the updated draft, we'll have a specific place in there, but that's just the general section we're going to work on incorporating it.
Okay, so we don't need to decide right now exactly where, but the whole section is a section that's been added. If you'll turn to that, it says urban design recommendations. So it will fit in there somewhere. So can I have a motion to accept that language as going somewhere in that section?
Motion to accept.
Okay, second?
I second it.
Okay, fine. Once again, please let me know if you do not accept that or you object or want to abstain, in the absence of which I will say that has been passed, and it looks like it has. So that will be incorporated in that section somewhere. So far so good. Let's see if we can stay on a roll here. I think even though there are a lot of things we've jumped over, we will probably continue to jump over them, at least for the time being. And let's see how much of the rest of the text we can get through. I'm kind of thinking that most of the rest of this is probably, from where we stopped last time, probably not terribly controversial, except maybe one or two things. So I'd like to start at the bottom of page 17, like line 24. So what we have here, we approved the first two paragraphs on building heights, building massing and heights, and we stopped here because this paragraph has got some language in it that we might not have been able to approve last time. Specifically, it refers on page 18, line 7, to portions of buildings directly across from the villages should be no more than 115 feet high. My understanding now, and Brian, I make sure I'm speaking correctly, is that Virginia Tech has agreed that limit should be 105.
They've agreed that wing of the building would go down to 105 feet. I think they may have a representative here. I don't know if they want to speak to that at all, if there are any questions relating to that.
Well, yeah, Paul and Christopher probably should indicate whether or not they're okay with that.
We're still. I mean, I'm not. This is not my background, so we need. It's taken us a little while to get an independent consultant to look at it. So I hope to get the person signed up like in the next day or two. But we still need an independent analysis of this because clearly I have no clue. So I need to find someone who does.
Okay. Christopher, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I concur with Paul's statement, and I thought that in the last meeting we had said that we were specifically going to skip this portion of the discussion and table that to the next meeting in 2 weeks. So we were not going to be discussing anything with building.
Yeah, I think the idea was not until you were satisfied with the shadow studies. So we can, I suppose, just jump over this, continue to jump over this. I would raise the point, though, that I mean, it may not be worth fussing about right now, but the height mention is followed by the phrase, if it is demonstrated through mechanisms such as shadow studies, crosses, et cetera, that it does not adversely impact residences. So it is conditioned, whatever height we put in there. On the other hand, what does that mean? It is demonstrated, because their shadow studies might demonstrate it, and yours, Paul and Christopher, might contradict it. So I suppose it's probably best not to tackle this paragraph, given that condition that's added on there is kind of subjective.
Yeah. Yes, please. Let's just put this off for now.
Okay.
And I would also put, because there is still this open item about the buffering, and we really need to get this architect to speak with Gensler and then advise us. So, first of all, I want to thank Virginia Tech for coming down 10 feet, but we have to, or from their perspective, 20 feet, but we still just need someone who knows what they're talking about to look at it from our perspective.
Okay. Is everybody okay with that on the task force? I can't imagine anybody's going to want to push to incorporate.
Sounds good.
Sure. Okay. So we're going to leave that paragraph alone. We'll continue to leave that alone for now. So then what we have is a lot of struck out material starting at line 11 or whatever it is. And I think a lot of this is struck out because it's just antiquated or been supplanted by other things. I mean, I can spot some things that don't belong here already. Like preserving the sycamore tree on line 31, which apparently has been dead for some time, and other things that I guess are really just simply not appropriate. But a lot of this, Brian, I take it is essentially supplanted by other language.
That's
like
right.
the previous pages and things like that.
That's right.
Okay. So that struck out language goes from line 11 on page 18 through well, at least through 5. I guess line 7 is a different thing. I can't tell if it is or not. I think line 7 on page 19 looks like it's a straggler from somewhere. So we could include that too. Is there anybody who objects to the strikeout of all that material from line 11 on page 18 through line 7 on 19? Does anybody want to discuss that? Okay, not hearing that, I think we can consider that that is struck, that we approve that. All right, then on page 19, we have some added material, quite a bit of it. Let's just do it section by section here. So line 8 through line 36, I'm trying to see what kind of a heading we have for that. This is more transportation things yet, Brian, isn't it? Kind of, that these paragraphs are dealing with?
That's right. Lines 8 through 36 all relate to transportation recommendations for
Okay.
individual subjects A1 and A2.
All right. So I don't see a heading that says that. The way this looks like it's grouped, it all looks like it's still part of the building size and height. That's the last heading I see. Should there be a heading in here, or is that?
Yeah, there should be. That may have when doing the document comparison between the original and the updated one, for some reason it may not have been
Transferred
included
over.
in there. Yeah.
Okay. So you'd propose to put some heading in there, probably, or what?
Yeah, in the clean version, I'm pretty confident we do have a heading right there.
Okay, fine. Does anybody want to have any questions about any of this material? Okay. No hands. I see no hands. So I'm going to say that if we have no questions,
David, I have a quick question. There's I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. And number 5, it says that on-street parking is strongly encouraged.
Okay, all right.
So we're encouraging street parking?
So it would appear, but I think it means street parking within the development area.
Okay.
That's right.
Not like in our communities.
Okay.
Is that your concern?
But no, I was just kind of thinking about, where parking was. I was trying to remember where our last conversations about parking landed. But I just wanted to make sure I was reading that correctly, that on-street parking is being encouraged.
Okay.
As opposed to trying to have, I think one concern I think others have also expressed is just how many cars we're drawing to this immediate area.
Right.
And that sort of thing. So,
sure. How much on-street parking can there actually be here, Brian, or anybody?
I think it probably, it depends on the final road network design. One of the reasons that we encourage on-street parking, and I can let Bob or Tim speak more to this, is if they'd like to, is it provides some separation between the pedestrians on the sidewalk and the moving vehicles, and so it really makes for a more comfortable and safer pedestrian experience to have on-street parking.
Okay.
Could I just ask, since you mentioned that, if you go down 14th Street in DC, it seems like they try to do that by having sidewalk, bike lane, on-street parking. Is that something you're considering doing? I don't know if that's even a benefit, but that's what they do on 14th Street.
I think the plan right now is to have the bike lane continue the way the city is going to have it from the outside of the parked vehicles all the way up.
Would these just be like painted lanes? They wouldn't be actual separated. You know what I'm talking about?
Right. Yeah, they would just be painted.
Okay. It's too bad we can't do more than that. I'm not going to necessarily argue that it all has to be changed. But when you've got that situation, I'm glad you raised this, Paul, because it is a mixed bag as far as I can tell. When you have that, people are always opening their car doors into bicycles going by. there's always that issue.
Yeah, and I should note that's just what's being proposed. That's not something that we would normally include in the comp plan. That's sort of detailed.
Okay, you're just including bike lanes, but that's details to be worked out when when an application's filed. Okay. I wish more places would do what they do in the Netherlands in busy streets where they have actual bike lanes between the sidewalk and the curb so that nobody is opening car doors or crossing bike lanes to get into a parking space. But that's my own pet thing. It works so well when that happens in a place like the Netherlands that it's just too bad you don't see it more here. Anyway, but Paul, I'm sorry, I sort of interrupted you. Are you satisfied with the answer or?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else on that or on anything in that section? Okay, so I think we can consider lines 8 through 36 on page 19 to be approved. And then the next group is parks, open space, and landscape buffers, which is only really a couple of few paragraphs. Anybody have any comments on this, on that language that's being added? I don't see anything. Brian, the statement on 4142 that says figures 16 and 17 show the recommended location of open space and all. Have we fiddled with those figures in such a way that that's not accurate anymore?
I think we might have, or we will have when moving the building height map. And you know, once we update the draft text and move things around, we'll be sure to update any references to any figures so that they remain accurate.
Okay, fine. That was the only thing that caught my eye. Everybody else okay? Right, subject to the possibility that that might have to be changed. I think we've approved lines 38 on page 19 through 8 on page 20. And now we have more added text under the heading environment, lines 10 through 36 on page 20. Does anybody have any question about those?
I'd like to say something.
Yes, go ahead.
So we were having a discussion, LRCA, that there should be a section here dealing with nighttime light pollution from the tall buildings. And I think environment, where we're considering all these other impacts, the nighttime lighting and doing something to mitigate that should be added in here.
Okay.
I second that. Do you have language in mind?
No, we would hope that the staff could think of language.
Yeah, we LRCA had sent us those comments back in December, and we already began working on language to address light pollution to add to the environmental section. So when we come back with an updated draft, we'll include that.
So that will be a paragraph that will go in this section.
That's right.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Stephanie, for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Anybody else on this section? Okay. Subject to the fact that to staff's later addition of a light pollution paragraph here, I think in the absence of any other comments or objections, that we have approved the environment language down through line 36. All right, now we have subunit recommendations. I'm trying to see how much we just want to. Let's first just do subunit A1, which goes from line 43, well, essentially from the beginning of this section, to page 21, line 40. Okay. Subunit A1 with some subordinate sections on land use and parks and stuff. Does anybody have any questions about this? I see one thing we probably need to focus on, but I'll give somebody else a chance first. I'm not seeing anything yet. Are we at a point where we are willing to adopt the language from lines 45 through 49, or I guess that for whole first paragraph, given that it is specifying FAR and square feet of different types of uses, because it seems to me that we had kind of passed over that deliberately when any of that was mentioned earlier in this document. Which I think is true, Brian, isn't it? I mean, if we do this, we're essentially approving this FAR and these number of square feet and residential things, and we would probably have to go back and make sure we were consistent elsewhere.
Yeah, it should be consistent with the earlier parts of the plan where these kind of subunit numbers were considered in aggregate.
Okay.
But if there's any discussion on the land use or intensity recommendations here, I think now would be the appropriate time to have that, or if there are any questions related to it.
I agree. So if there are any, let's have some, but I'll say probably I would recommend that we that whatever we discuss, we leave that paragraph alone and then go back and look at it in conjunction with any other paragraph that would need to be coordinated with it, which we can maybe do for next time, or depending on how much time we have today. I'm not seeing anything. What I would suggest then is that we consider that we have approved lines 38 through 41. And then after that first paragraph, Brian, I'm not saying that anything here is inconsistent with what we've done. Do you think that's correct?
Yes, I believe that's accurate. Yeah.
All right. So if we just leave that one paragraph out, we could start at line 6 on page 21 and go through the whole rest of that part of that section.
That's correct.
All right. So what we are agreeing that we have approved is page 20, lines 38 through 41. I guess you could say through 43 if you want, because the rest of what we're approving is subunit A1. And then on page 21, lines 6 through 40. If everybody's in agreement, I'm going to say that we have approved that. I'm not seeing any objection. Okay. Next, we have subunit A2, and this will have a similar issue. All right. Subunit A2 goes from page 21, line 42 to page 22, line 27. But again, the second paragraph there deals with FAR and square feet and all that. So similarly, I would suggest that we should pass over that. Does anybody have a comment on this or a disagreement with what I'm saying, suggesting?
David, this is Jennifer. I don't disagree. Why are we tabling those and coming back to them?
Well, partly because we had some figures earlier in the last couple of sessions and earlier parts of the document that discussed just how many units and what was residential and what was how much residential, how much commercial and institutional, and we kind of passed over it. I think largely because I wasn't sure that we were all ready to agree with those figures. Floor area ratio figures or numbers of units for different uses. I mean, it may turn out that we really don't have any problem with it, but because we passed over it earlier, it seems to me we should pass over this now and then go back and see where else are all these references and look at them all together and make sure we're all comfortable with all these unit figures and square feet figures and similar things.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd like to say something.
Sure.
So subunit A2 is the Virginia Tech site.
Right.
And that's where we're going to study further the height, which has the bearing on FAR and on all the language that's in this paragraph, these paragraphs. Right. So right. I don't think we can do anything about them now. And okay. The other thing I wanted to say is that all the development concepts that have been presented to us are with these FARs and height limits and all that in mind. So we've all seen what's being proposed, right?
I think so, yes. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we were making something controversial out of, or making a fuss over something that's not really controversial. But I guess it warrants a sort of a separate discussion. Anybody else on this?
David.
Yeah, sure.
I would like to ask, because this issue that Converge, which is basically HIT, has entered into this agreement. Well, it hasn't entered into agreement under the Public-Private Economic Infrastructure Act of 2002, which I didn't even know existed a few months ago. They have to do a comprehensive agreement. So they didn't do it. It's now past the second year. So the real question I have is, to what extent has Virginia Tech actually signed off on all the things that Virginia Tech that's being presented to us? Because they have only an interim agreement in place, and it's clear under the law that they have to have a comprehensive agreement in place, and it's clear under the law that Virginia Tech has the final say in this, and yet we keep on hearing from Converge, but we never quite hear the statement, and Virginia Tech has signed off on this. So, there are a lot of assumptions underlying what we're talking about now. I'd just like to know, because it's been a mystery to me after a number of FOIA requests, like, what has Virginia Tech signed off on?
Okay, Brian or somebody?
Brian, do you want me to address this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Paul, I understand where you're coming from, and you're right. Currently, Converge and Virginia Tech are working together underneath an interim agreement, and we are negotiating tooth and nail on the comprehensive agreement, but it is a beast of a document. So it's not unusual for documents, agreements like that to take this long, even with WMATA, where it's a similar sort of concept. And so Virginia Tech is reviewing everything you have seen, and I think David Baker's still on the line. So they're well aware of what is being proposed. And then they're also aware of how changes to what has been proposed would make the current agreement void. But, and as I told you before, how Virginia Tech is able to fund their building is through the proceeds from the commercial development.
Right. I just want to, and you bring up an interesting issue as it relates to WMATA, and I haven't really looked that closely at it. But, to some extent, we've all been working under an assumption that everyone has the authority to do what they say they're doing. And, and I don't want to be a pain, because you've actually been, amenable to our request, but I would like to know to what extent. I'd like to hear from Virginia Tech, we agree with these plans, right? Instead of suddenly hearing that, oh no, Virginia Tech doesn't agree with these plans, and once this task force is over, all the assumptions we've been working on have not necessarily been true.
Right. So this is David Baker on behalf of Virginia Tech. I can speak to that, if that's all right, Mr. Chairman.
It's fine. Yes, please do. Any answer that anybody can provide.
Yes. So thank you. So Mr. Rothstein, thanks for the question. We are, as you stated, working under an interim agreement, which is right now the best that we have, working towards a comprehensive agreement. The current plan is that we would have a comprehensive agreement in place for our Board of Visitors to review at their meeting in June. So they're ultimately the final decision makers for the university. At this point, staff has been working, to Neil's point, around the clock to try and pull this together, and the next opportunity to bring a comprehensive agreement to the board for their consideration is that June meeting. So at this point, everything you have before you and everything you've seen, Virginia Tech has and is supportive of, and that's what we're working towards. But that's the timeline that we're operating under.
Okay. I'll just finally note that under the interim agreement, there were supposed to be deliverables to the Board of Visitors on May 30th. And then I did a FOIA request and those deliverables weren't given. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the case. Neil probably knows and David knows. So, it's just, there's no, we have what you've shown to us, and what I've learned from David Werman is that graphical presentations are nice, but not necessarily reality. So we don't have, to my knowledge, anything that really concretely says Virginia Tech supports X. And I won't take up any more time about this. I just want to note that. And I don't know, David, you've done this more than I have, David Werman. I know, and Brian, I'm just new to this. I learned all this through a series of FOIA requests. So I just don't want to be surprised later on by a process that I just am not acquainted with.
Okay, sure. And actually, I haven't had a lot of FOIA experience. So
it's not FOIA, it's just development. Maybe it's more development done on a public land. I don't know.
All right.
Sorry, David, can I just answer that run?
Please, yes.
So Paul, the way the system works in Fairfax County is the comp plan is really a staff-driven process, and staff has heard from Virginia Tech and from Converge, as has the supervisor's office. When we file the CDP FTP, CDP stands for Conceptual Development Plan, and the Final Development Plan for any site, the landowner of the site has to sign a consent saying that the applicant, who generally is the developer, sometimes it's the owner as well, but the developer, that the consent basically says that, yes, I agree that what is being proposed is my intention for the land. And so when Converge, on behalf of Virginia Tech, puts in the application for a CDP and FTP, there will be a consent letter that goes along with that. So that's the legal document. But in the comp plan process, it's technically a staff-driven process, which is why you don't have like a legal document that says, we, Virginia Tech, support this plan. But you're hearing it verbally from David Baker, who does work at Virginia Tech. We've met jointly with planning staff as well as the supervisor's office. So they've heard it from the mouth, God's mouth, God's lips, something like that.
And Neil, to add on to that, the comprehensive plan is a guiding document that would guide land use here, no matter the owner or the developer. So if Virginia Tech were to decide to sell their land, the guidance in the comprehensive plan would still hold. Or if Rushmark were to drop out as a developer, the guidance in the comprehensive plan would still continue to be the guidance, because it contains the things that are identified in these higher level policies and that have been identified by the community as being important for the area.
Okay, I won't take any more time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Thank you for David and Neil for answering. Given Paul's concerns here, does that affect anything that we can approve here if we're once again assuming that we're going to pass over that first paragraph? Brian, we're still okay with the rest of it, right?
Lines 7 through 27.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So here we're going to approve lines 7 through 27 unless somebody else has got some other comment that I'm not seeing. Okay. So I think we can consider that approved. Subunit 3 is just this one addition. A3 being the villages in the pavilion, I believe.
That's right. And it's not an addition. It's been moved from another part of the plan. There's nothing changed with it.
Right. And it seems to be simply reflecting reality, the existing condition.
That's right.
Right. Okay. I take it everybody's okay with that. Let me know if you're not. So now we've got this part that says portion of land unit B, Haycock Road South, which goes, well, there's a lot of crossed out stuff, so I'm not exactly sure how far it goes. Is it just, Brian, is that really just the next page, basically, huh? And then are we talking about different stuff, right?
That's right.
Once you get to the strikeout, that's a whole other subject.
It is, and this is once again, none of these are new recommendations. This is, all from the current plan. Some of it has just been moved from elsewhere, or in some cases, like right here, where it says at the optional level, that was, it's not a substantive change. It's more of a, it's an update to, improve readability, essentially.
Okay. Does anybody have a question about any of this? Nobody? Okay. Some of this I see, I sort of feel as unfortunate to be here, but as Brian says, this is in the existing plan. I mean, this addresses possible development on the south side of Haycock, which is which is either part of it's the gates or the rest of it's in single family homes, and Hickory behind it. We had this issue, I think, last time when I think people Jennifer and Cheryl brought this up regarding the boundary or the buffer and everything. But if anything in this ought to be changed, it's not being changed in this proceeding because we're not fiddling with language that really isn't related to the changes being sought. So, anybody else on this section though? I think we can consider that approved, which is to say line 34 on page 22 through line 19, I guess, on 23. Well, actually, I do have one question though. What does it mean, Brian, on line 423? What does it mean, 1/2 of the remaining general development criteria? What is that 1/2 of a criterion?
So as you see, there's the immediate bullet point refers to criterias 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the general development criteria. And I'll scroll to it in a minute, but there are 10 general development criteria for the transit development area, the TDA. So it's saying to develop at this intermediate level, being referenced on line 46 of page 22, that all the site-specific conditions would have to be met. Criteria 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then of criteria 5 through 10, 3 of those would have to be met. And that's a reference to a little earlier in the document.
Okay, so I see what you mean by half of the remaining criteria, meaning 5 through 10, which are not covered in the previous bullet point. Okay.
That's right.
I know you're using the same language that was already there. I just don't know. I guess there's no better way to say it.
Yeah, it's the same language that was already there.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? I think that was the only question I had. All right, if nobody else has a comment, I think we've approved this land unit B language. Now we've got a lot of strikeout material, starting on line 21 and going through almost the whole rest of the document. At least let's say through, I don't know, Brian, does it make sense to group this at all? What are we looking at here?
So
we could group it by section, even though, go ahead.
Yeah, I can just give a brief overview of it. So there's the alternatives for development. It refers to this base, intermediate, and maximum level of development. And you can see some of the similar language, criteria 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the general development criteria for intermediate, and for all site specific, all the general development criteria in order to achieve the maximum level of development. All of that is still in the plan, but we've put it further up, and it's not necessarily in the same format or precisely this language, but the idea of it is still in the draft plan. But we've moved it further up, one in the section of the plan where we're talking about what is actually planned for the transit development area. and what's planned for the land unit A and land unit B. So that is still contained in the plan. And similarly here, that where it has the base and intermediate levels for land unit A and land unit B, this is one of those formatting changes where earlier in the plan it had the maximum, the optional level of development, if you will, under the WMATA tract and the Virginia Tech tract and the villages in the pavilion, or the village in the pavilion. And then much later in the document, separate from those, it had the base, base and intermediate level recommendations. So we decided to consolidate those all in the same place. So you have the base recommendation right next to the optional level of recommendation. So you don't have to look in two different spots in the document to figure out what all is planned for a single part of the transit development area. The urban design concept, again, this was something that we moved further up into the front of the document and the plan, so that it's now in the land unit A section. Similar with building heights, and then the pedestrian circulation is addressed in the transit development area portion of the plan and in the land unit A portion of the plan. And so that's what, a lot of these kind of headings and this information, it may have been updated, but these sections haven't been completely deleted. They've just been, moved to what we thought was a more appropriate spot so that it allowed a better logical flow.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Does anybody have any question on these couple of pages of strikeout material? Starting page 23, line 21 through page 25, line 46. No questions? All right. In the absence of that, I would say that we've approved that whole section of strikeout material. Now we have, let's see, recommendations outside of the transit development area. It's line 47, bottom of page 25. Bern, do you want to explain what this actually is about?
Yeah, I guess for this, we didn't really make any substantive changes since it's really outside of the scope of the authorization. This is for, this refers to the rest of the TSA that's not in the transit development area. So I can go back up to that map, but so it is basically just referring to the portions of land unit B that aren't in the TDA, which is everything kind of outside of that, outside of the gates and the few properties in your community, David.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it refers to the rest of land unit B, land unit C, and land unit D.
Okay.
Which you can see here on the screen.
Okay. So I would say that means that the fact that on line 3 we're talking about densities of 8 to 12 dwelling units, where we've passed that over in other parts of this document, there's no reason to pass over it here. It's not dealing with the transit development area. It's not dealing with the proposal. It's simply reflecting existing densities.
That's right. Yeah, that remains unchanged.
Okay. Does anybody have a question on this material? These like 3 paragraphs or 2 paragraphs, whatever they are, going down through line 12 of page 26. Don't see anything, so why don't we consider that to be approved? And then we have more strikeout material. This, I take it, is all somewhere else. this transportation stuff, or something
Yeah,
supplanting it as somewhere else.
that's correct. Yeah, we moved it because one, these were transportation recommendations that applied to the entire TSA, and it was almost a little unclear where it was since it is kind of immediately after the recommendations outside of the transit development area. And we also wanted to kind of better integrate with the other recommendations in the plan. So again, the I think we updated the transportation recommendations significantly, I guess, as we've all reviewed previously, but it's all now at the front of the plan instead of the back.
Okay, and that's true of the pedestrian circulation recommendations and all that too. I know that's in here somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have a question about this struck out material? All right. If we don't have one, I would say that we can consider that approved. And then there's a little bit of material that's simply existing material at the end, right? Heritage resources, public facilities, that's all just references to places.
That's right.
Okay. Right. Well, we seem to be at the end of the document, which is nice because last time I wasn't sure we'd get there. So it's worked out pretty well. Now the question is, well, how should we best use our time? I don't know if we're prepared to go back and look at any of the things we passed over. Brian, do you have a recommendation on what we should do? We certainly have the time, and nobody would mind leaving early, I'm sure. But
yeah, I mean, if there's some discussion to be had about the land use recommendations, so retail retail, residential units, square footage, office space, all of that we've skipped over. I think, we if we have the time to have that discussion now, we want to have that.
Okay.
If people have thoughts on that, I can.
Okay.
And again, I don't know how you would necessarily want to have that discussion. If you want to look at it by, I think it might make sense to look at it by subunit and then kind of go up from there, since the kind of higher level recommendations. So in the references for the TDA and for the land unit are written so that they incorporate the suggestions at the subunit level.
Okay.
All we had asked for, Brian, was what are the current numbers and what are the new numbers proposed? We don't have to put them in the plan, but we were asking the county to provide us with the comparison.
Yeah, I think we had provided that back in December at the December meeting. I can pull that up right now.
So what do you mean comparisons between what, like types of units and numbers of units and?
Yeah, we were just, I mean, I missed part of the December meeting, so I apologize. Okay. So if you've already gone through that, then that's up to me to get caught up. But it was my memory that the only thing that we were asking for was to show us what is there now and what is being proposed.
All right, Brian, where, I know you sent this to us. Do you remember when and where? Is this the presentation you sent in December?
That's right. I have it pulled up on the screen right now. If you're able to
see
it.
So we can go at our leisure to the web site, and this is under what, staff presentation or something like that, I think.
That's right. Yeah, I believe I'd sent this out to the task force back in December, but I have it pulled up right now on the screen for reference.
Okay.
You can see it.
Sure.
So this is for subunit A1, the monotract, with the current plan here on the left side for the 720 dwelling units in comparison to the proposed plan on the right side.
Cheryl, this is Ben. I don't know if it would also be helpful to you, but were you interested in the existing development also, so that you could kind of make a comparison across the three scenarios?
I'm not even sure how to answer that, Ben, because when we got to just approving the numbers, all we asked for was, can you just show us what's there now? And, we've seen the pictures, we've seen the artist renditions of what's going to be there, but we just wanted to see, what the differences were that we were approving. I have no problem with this.
Yeah, just for I think maybe just for full transparency for the group, maybe what we can do is recreate this chart, but add the existing conditions and then just post that on the site or distribute it to the group so you can kind of see the three.
That sounds like a good idea. Of course, under A1, there's nothing there now, right?
That's right. It's parking garage.
There isn't anything under any category, dwelling units or commercial or anything.
That's right.
Brian, David, this is Christopher.
Yes, Christopher.
Has any of this been reviewed by and commented on by FCPS as to the impact of potentially
schools,
dwelling units to school districts?
It has been. I think it was about a year ago now when we covered that. I think that was maybe last January, February, where we talked about the school's impact. And at that time, we hadn't written the plan language, so the impact we discussed there at that point in time was actually, I think, we made the assumptions we made were that there would be more dwelling units than what we have planned for. We've asked them for an updated impact to account for the lower number of dwelling units, and I can send that out to you all. From the top of my head, I believe the difference between what is currently planned for subunits A1 and A2 and the proposed plan would be about 70 new students, split between elementary, middle, and high school.
Brian, these are the figures you gave us when you spoke to our civic association a few weeks ago, and I think somebody had raised that question in our meeting, and I think you said under the present plan, the by right plan, if you will, there would be 102 new students added to the system. Under the plan change that we're looking at here, it would be 178. So yeah, it's about 76 difference. Those are the figures you gave us.
Yeah, okay. That's right.
And those are total across K through 12?
That's right.
I'm sorry, David, you said 178?
Yeah, 102. You get if they build according to what they can do now, you get 102 new students, and if we make these changes and they build according to what they want, it would go up to 178. So it's a difference of 76. I mean, you do have to consider that, because if they built by right, we're getting those students anyway. If you follow me, which I think you do.
No, I do. I know in the back of my head that already all the school districts in the area are already at capacity or over capacity. So
yeah.
Curious to know what FCPS's stance is going to be on that.
Yeah, I can go back to the presentation that we gave last, I think it was, like I said, last January, February. And at the time we had discussed some of FCPS's proposals that they have in their capital improvement plan for addressing capacity issues. And I can send that information out to the task force.
Okay. Is that Christopher? Are you okay with that, or do you want to pursue this?
Yeah, I am. I'm just curious because I know, like, our own school district, Haycock, just underwent a whole renovation that finished 2 years ago. So I'd be curious to know how FCPS is going to react to having to potentially renovate again and expand after having invested already a substantial amount of money into that school. So,
yeah, 178 students is adding, what about five, 6 more classrooms or something at least, right?
well, 178 spread across K through 12. So I guess,
Well, that's what you mean, right? It's not, it's, Brian, that would be spread across, right? It's not like every year you're going to get.
That's right. Yeah, it's K through 12, the entire gamut of grade levels that FCPS serves.
So it would be likely heavier in some than others, wouldn't it? In the sense that, as well, I don't know. Maybe I'm just speculating. Don't worry, just strike that. Don't worry about it. Okay. Did you want to?
This is Darren. Are
Yeah,
they
Darren.
using urban standards for the calculation? Because when we studied Tyson's, the calculations were significantly lower because the units and their impact. So, or is this using traditional methods?
They take unit type into account. So a mid-rise apartment building, for example, unit would be assumed to generate fewer students than a townhouse would, for example.
Right. Some of them are like 0.72, for example, students, that sort of thing. But I know in Tyson's it was a completely new methodology used because of the nature of it being a city and so forth. So is that being contemplated here or no?
I can ask them more about their methodology. I mean, as far as I know, it isn't anything different than what they use throughout most of the rest of the county for this case. Here we are speaking mostly about multifamily units, though. So, like as you referenced a second ago, those tend to, they expect fewer students from those than a single family detached house or a townhome. We are contemplating, I think it's approximately for the WMATA track, subunit A1, plan for 900 dwelling units, approximately 80 of which could be townhouses for the proposed plan. So that would result in a fewer number of students than if it were all townhouses or all single family detached houses.
Darren, you okay with that?
Great. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Okay. Anybody else? Are we continuing with going through the subunits? I think, is that what we decided to do, Brian? To go through your chart here?
Yeah, and I can go on to A2 if
let's do that then.
And for reference, in terms of what is an A2 today, the Virginia Tech building is, I believe, just over 100,000 square feet. I think it's about 101,000 square feet. And under the current plan, it could be built as 130 dwelling units and approximately 44,000 square feet of commercial use, or up to 240,000 square feet of institutional use, which is the option that's been developed today. Obviously, not to the absolute limit of 240,000 square feet. In fact, most of that hasn't been developed there. Under the proposed plan, it would be mixed use, capped at 2.5 floor area ratio, which would be approximately 817,000 square feet. And that would be multifamily, 440 multifamily units, up to approximately 180,000 square feet of office space, 106,000 square feet of institutional, and 18,000 square feet of retail.
Brian, right now, how much you said they have not built up to 240,000 square feet institutional, and everything that's there now is considered institutional, correct?
That's right.
I think you've given me this figure, but about how much have they actually built up to now for comparison to what we'd be seeing here?
I believe it's about 101,000 square feet.
Okay.
If that wasn't owned by a university, would these numbers be different? Would they be more retail and residential? I mean, I'm just trying to think, we're doing a plan here, and we should assume that Virginia Tech owns that land. And so we assume that there should be institutional numbers there. Is that correct?
If we're doing a plan here, we're assuming that Virginia Tech owns the land. We are, I mean, we are, with this plan, we are assuming that Virginia Tech owns the land, but there are other institutional uses that could be built there besides, Virginia Tech, for example.
I think.
So
Go ahead.
The county feels comfortable having an institution there of some means, that's something that is good for everybody. That's what we're really saying here.
That's right.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions on what we see on this particular chart? Now, Brian, I you mentioned this before, but even though you have all these different categories that say up to, I think you've indicated that they really can't go up to each one of them.
That's right. The FAR, the 2-point FAR limit is really the cap here, right? And so, which is about 817,000 square feet. And so, yeah, for example, if they were to develop, everything here and then some larger, all of the office, all the institutional, all the retail, and then decided they wanted to build larger dwelling units, that may result in fewer than 440 dwelling units if they hit the FAR cap. So this is the 2.5 FAR is really kind of the overall cap, and then the other portions of it can kind of float, so to speak. It's to allow for some amount of flexibility.
Do we have any breakdown as to how much more traffic we expect out of just the A2, given that it's institutional? I mean, the A1 is going to be largely residential and small. Well, there's offices too, I guess. I don't know. You haven't really broken down A1 and A2 anywhere, have you, as to how much additional traffic each one of those would generate?
Bob and Tim or Kevin, are you able to address that?
I don't know that we have. I can look into the TA and see if that's something that we do. But
I think it's in the TIA. I'm not sure if Kevin's on, but I think based on the number of square feet for each use type kind of dictates the amount of traffic that's created both on AM and PM, if that's correct. So basically it is accounted for based on each proposed unit, based on each use for each property. It's buried somewhere in that TIA.
It is, Neil. This is Kevin.
Sure.
I will say that we don't have a breakdown just subunit A1. If, for instance, it was developed on its own, all of the traffic projections have the are integrated development, right? So they assume that there's access to facilities. They assume that there is a small amount of interaction between the various uses on the site. So I don't have an actual breakout of just subunit A2. But it is, I mean, those uses are all in the traffic study as part of it. We could provide sort of a breakout of what each of those individual pieces generate, but then there are those internal interaction transit.
I hate to ask you to do something that, this late in the game like that, but, it could be that we'd have different reactions to the development of A1 from the development of A2, depending on how much traffic each one generated. I don't know. And the trouble with the TIA is, having talked to Bob about the TIA and heard what it's like, and look at his instructions on downloading and how much space it would take up, I think I forewent trying to go into the TIA, which is supposed to be highly technical. And I'm just relying on you guys to provide the information. But you got to figure most of us are not going to look at the TIA and try to find all of that information if it's not brought out where we can see it and compare it.
Sure. So we could fairly easily reapportion each of the things like the internal trips and the transit trips back, and then break them out by subunit and give you those trips that way. They're not presented that way in the TIA, but that's a relatively easy math exercise for us to do, and then we can pass those along to Bob and Tim, and they can pass them on to the task force.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't want to cause you to have a lot more trouble, but if you think it's easy to break them out, maybe it would be just worthwhile seeing.
Yeah, that's a pretty easy exercise for us.
Okay. Thank you.
Certainly.
Anybody else on this? Do you want to proceed through your chart further, Brian, or what?
I think so. The only changes we'd recommended were for A1 and A2. So these are all of the between the previous chart and this one, these are all of the changes that we were recommending in terms of land use. So again, I don't know if there's any further questions or discussion on this.
Cheryl, you were asking for something that went beyond this, right? In other words, which shows the existing usage.
No, I wasn't looking at existing usage. We were looking at plan, what was originally planned versus what is planned now.
Okay.
And it was just more informational, just to find out, how big or how small that we're doing this approval. But I mean, if we're ready to approve the numbers, that's great. And then the only thing we would have left then are the height issues.
Mm-hmm. How comfortable is everybody with the square footage and the FAR and the number of units that are dedicated to different things? Is anybody uncomfortable with them for any reason?
I think it's number one, you're in a transit designated area, right? Mm-hmm. And number two, you need to have a certain FAR to make it work in a sense. I mean, concessions on height and so forth are fantastic to achieve, but at a certain point, it's got to be. I don't want to use the word profitable in a sense, but really it does come down to, you start constricting FARs any further, and it's not profitable to have a development occur. So, these are fairly modest FARs in the scope of a TOD, a transit-oriented transit development area, whatever you want to call it, in my opinion. So I don't have a problem with this, and it seems it allows them to achieve enough yield to make it profitable. Otherwise, it'll never move forward, and that's not in the public's interest, in my opinion. So that's my comments.
Okay. Anybody else?
I would say after being through all the meetings for the last couple of years, Darren hit it right on the head. It could be more dense, but given the concerns that everybody has about traffic and things like that, but we still want the development over there. I think that if the county is comfortable with it, it is a nice compromise.
What is the FA? Is there an FAR assigned to these to A1 and A2? I know they're not A1 and A2 now, but is there an FAR assigned to them now? Because I don't see FAR under current plan, at least not for A2.
Yeah, there's not an FAR assigned to them now. It's it's just number of dwelling units and square footage, which we could at least not necessarily relating to the dwelling units, but with the, for example, the square footage of institutional, we could calculate that to be to an FAR equivalent. For the subunit A1, the Wilmata tract, we couldn't necessarily, just because it's on the number of dwelling units. So it's residential density, not necessarily, intensity, like FAR.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's nothing there now. So you have no, I mean, what would you do the FAR on? Not dwelling units, because there are none.
Well, I'm talking, just in reference to what's currently planned there. It's not planned using FAR. It's just number of dwelling units.
Yeah. I may be the only one who's balking on this at all, because and it probably is unreasonable for me to do that. But I mean, the difference in development here is what, between what's proposed and what's current makes a certain difference in the amount of traffic that's produced, and that's got consequences. And so if I say, yeah, sure, let's just go with these other dwelling units, I'm not completely sure I'm representing my area, my civic association area, in the way they want to be represented. But that really is tantamount to saying that I'm not going along with the whole plan. I'm not sure.
David,
I'm not willing to say that either. Yes, go ahead, Darren.
I don't want to cut you off, but
no, please go ahead. Any clarification is welcome.
Yeah, well, I think just in the broader context, we always got to remember that the lion's share of the traffic is going to come from the town center, and so this is really a step down, and more of an add-on, if you will, to the town center. But that's going to be the main draw, and so it's almost a disservice to these landowners and the area around there. So I just want to throw that in there as you, talk through this. I'm not sure all your community association members are going to agree with what you said in that sense, because if you've got a huge town center and then you've got what's there currently or what's proposed, I'm not sure that's in the best interest of the community, in my opinion. And there may be other people in your neighborhood who share that. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yes.
This is Christopher.
Yes, Christopher.
I present the counter to Darren's argument. I agree with you. I don't know if this is in the interest of my community either. I mean, it's significant. And I think what's not really being discussed here, and it's not really in the purview of the group, but in that shaded area that's not marked, or what's going on with the city's project. I mean, I know Carly's on the line, but I mean, they're proposing to build a huge development right there. It's going to significantly impact traffic in our community.
Right. Yes.
It doesn't really impact much of the city's community because the city doesn't surround that property. The county does. So we have to bear the burden of their development, and then by adding to it from Virginia Tech's side, subunit A2 and Wilmata's, I mean, it could be a significant impact of traffic and of density and of perhaps undesirable things in our community that currently does not exist at all.
Yeah,
it's patently unfair, Chris, to the landowners. Number one, they've got to.
I'm sorry, I have to object to your comments at all. I mean, you don't even live in this area.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter.
Let's not get on that. If Darren is here,
let's just put it out there.
Hey, Chris,
that's all the state is
red herring, pal.
Okay, wait.
David, this is Jennifer. Can I say something?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Who is this?
This is Jennifer.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
I think it's wonderful that we're seeing the different perspectives expressed. I think, I do live and represent a community that is actually on the map. So I have to say, like, the reality is, I don't think traffic is going to get better in being this close to the urban core. That's
right.
an unfortunate reality. I don't think I've heard anybody on any of these calls or meetings express that they like traffic. Who likes traffic? I mean, a crazy person likes traffic. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, my hope and what I hope we're trying to accomplish with this plan is to make this development the absolute best it can be, so that we have something in our neighborhood, so that we don't have to be part of the traffic, that we have something close enough, that, you know, we have amenities, that we have retail, that we have those types of services and goods close enough that we're not having to routinely travel out. And I think that's something that is a potential benefit. But whether this development comes or not, I don't think traffic or those things are getting better. So I hope we can embrace in trying to make this plan the best we can make it, to promote the types of retail services and that sort of thing, to make this the area that we're happy to be in.
Okay.
So we can avoid traffic. So that's something I would like to offer as consideration for how I view this.
David, if I could just...
Yes, Christopher, and Darren, I'll let you talk again too, but not at the same time. So Christopher, you first.
That was me. This is Paul.
Oh, so who we got now, Paul?
Yeah, I guess we all sound alike at the village.
Okay.
But you know, we've had now meetings of the board. We've had dozens of communications over our Google group, and you know, one thing we've not heard is, you know what we need? We need more, right? So, you know, it's nice for people to talk theoretically about what's good for people, landowners in the area, or owners or residents in the area. But we're actually owners and residents in the area. And we have been polling, Christopher and I, have been polling other owners and residents in the area. And we're not getting this theoretical answer that somehow this massive amount of development is really great for us. So, you know, we all represent our own areas, and we're all supposed to speak to the people in our own areas. And certainly Christopher and I have. And I would just simply encourage those of us who are here not to represent our own particular views, but to represent our community's views, to consult with our communities and to come back and say what that is, because the theory of someone from outside the area is not as important as the reality of people within the area.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And before I speak, I'd like to address a few things people have said here. First of all, Darren is entitled to be on this task force. I mean, first of all, Supervisor Faust, excuse me, is entitled to appoint anybody he wants. He represents the MCA, and that may have a different viewpoint from that of the rest, because the MCA is looking at a kind of a wider view of what's good for the area, whereas we're looking at, you know, what's in our backyards. On the other hand, I would say that you're correct. Darren is the one person on this task force who will not have to live with consequences, because he doesn't live near here. And I have to disagree with you, Darren, on one thing here. When you say it's not fair to the developers are not entitled to this change. They're entitled to what they've got under the existing plan. They're asking for something. It's a privilege, all right? So you can't say it's unfair to them. If the consequences to the neighborhood were sufficiently negative, I think it's perfectly acceptable to say to them, sorry, you can't develop. The negative consequences do not warrant your developing more than you're already permitted. I'm not saying we should go that way, but I don't think you say it's unfair to them. They aren't entitled.
So, David,
yeah.
David, if
yes.
I could,
Mm-hmm.
when I was referring to fair,
Mm-hmm.
what I was referring to was that, you know, you can't hang over their heads that there's a town center that they have no control over.
Correct.
And
yes.
say, okay, so that's what I'm referring to. Fair is that the town center and its impacts on the community should not be held, you know, negatively against these projects.
Yes, yes.
That's the fairness issue that I'm referring to.
Okay, okay.
As to whether or not you know, I should have a voice, you know, I'm sorry that some of you feel as though because I don't live right next to the project that I should be silenced or not allowed to have a voice. But guess what? I do have a voice and I won't be silenced. So you can keep throwing up that argument, but it doesn't matter. Okay, I have a voice and I will continue to have a voice, and I have opinions. So be it. Thank you, David, for
Sure,
protecting my interest there.
Sure, and I don't think we should debate this anymore. I mean, Darren's been on the task force since it started, and he's there for a reason. But as I said, he won't take we naturally are looking out for what's happening right in our backyard. He may be looking out more for what's in the best interest of development around a metro center, and that's a different issue. Okay. I think the way I would look at this myself is just picking numbers out of a hat. Most of the consequences of what's going to happen around here are going to come from the city's development. So let's suppose you said the city's development was going to cause 80 more cars on Haycock during a certain hour of the day. And then if you said under the current plan for the transit station area, if it were developed to that extent, that would be an additional 10 cars, bringing it up to 90. But if you made a change and we allowed what was sanctioned, what was proposed, what was being asked for, it would bring the cars up to 100. In any of those cases, certainly the city is contributing the most. But maybe we say 90 cars is the most we can take. We don't even want 80. And now you're asking for 100. So I'm just saying it's incremental, and it may be small increments compared to what the city's project is going to dump on us. But it's still legitimate for us to say we might want to just hold it to the smaller increment. And that's what I'm still wrestling with. As I think the staff knows, I have given them a bunch of questions that are rather specific about traffic differences at intersections and on roads and stuff. And I think, Brian, you said I'd probably get that back shortly.
That's right. Yeah, I can send that to you tomorrow.
It's got other something. I mean, it may or may not affect any of you. I'm happy to share it with you when I get it back. It's stuff that will affect my community because it focuses on numbers of cars on Haycock and different stretches, levels of service at lights. And I know we presented that, but a lot of stuff like that, so that I can send it to my civic association for comparison, and they can see whether these increments are more than they want to handle. So that's the only reason I'm kind of a little bit reluctant to go into these dwelling units. But I will admit that if we're going to change the plan, we've got to come up with numbers, and I don't have any better numbers than the ones that are being proposed. Yes, I'm sorry.
David, I just want to say part of the logic here sounds a little like, oh, the guy's drowning, so what's another few gallons to throw on top of him? So, there are ways around this. There is senior housing. If there is more senior housing for people who are retired, the odds of them using the roads during rush hour are less than non-senior housing. So, and I think the same thing would also be the case if you had, for example, smaller units that will tend to be occupied by students, even though Virginia Tech isn't going to have dormitory housing, but will tend to be occupied by students who will go to Virginia Tech. So to just sort of say, oh, sorry, Falls Church is going to be dumping all this on us, so there's nothing we can do, I disagree with that. In fact, we do know that Falls Church actually has a strategy of having these micro units there that are intended for the type of people who are living on 14th Street, have no cars, and are going to the beer garden next door. So, this sort of either or, I don't agree with from a planning perspective. And, once again, this sort of fatalistic, oh, gee, well, it's going to be really bad, so ain't nothing we can do. I don't agree with that either.
And as to the city's development?
Well, well, no, I'm not talking about the city's development, but what's going on here. And we know, for example, that Virginia Tech is going to have a big tower there. So we don't know. I don't know what it's going to consist of, but we do know that the types of dwellings affect the schools, but the types of dwellings also affect transportation.
Right. Mm-hmm.
and traffic.
Right. Mm-hmm.
David, I had my hand up.
Yeah, Cheryl.
You know, I think if we get back to the beginning, one of the things we wanted to do is to make sure that the metro remains open, that it remains open, that it's a robust metro station. That's really important to all of us. And given the fact that there's very little traffic coming through the metro station before the pandemic happened because of the Silver Line, this whole thing came about because we want to keep the metro open. We also want amenities, as Jennifer said. We live here. That would be great to have amenities over there. And we have looked at traffic a million times, and they showed us in the studies that we were failing at many intersections. And this development with this amount, these numbers of units, given the improvements that they're going to make, moves them from Fs to Ds, and from Ds to Cs in some instances. So we're actually getting improved traffic by having these developments, by having the improvements that are coming with these developments. We've been through this zillions of times. This is a moderate density. It's not a high density. It's a reasonable one. It keeps the metro open. We have gone through the traffic, and the traffic does not get worse with the improvements that are being made. It actually improves many of our intersections. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still a D level, but they're always going to be. It would be worse without the improvements that would be made in conjunction with what's happening here. That's what I've learned through this process.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This is Andrew.
Yes. Hi, Andrew.
Hey, good evening. Just a couple of thoughts to pick up on. You know, the density levels that are being proposed, I mean, they weren't picked out of thin air.
Mm-hmm.
It came after discussions with the supervisor's office and also trying to be, you know, understanding of, you know, existing established communities. If you look at, and I'd have to defer to Tim and Brian, but there was about the level of intensity, development intensity around, you know, for a TSA and what is appropriate. And if you look at the other TSAs in Fairfax County, from the Reston Innovate or the Herndon Innovation Station to the stations in Reston, to the stations in Tysons, even down to Huntington, at a 2.5 FAR, but certainly at a 0.96 FAR, this is certainly a, just to let everyone know, that is certainly a major step down in density. It's you know, the 0.96 is, I believe it's the lowest of all the TSAs in the county. The second thing too is that this is a density level that was needed and believed, I believe, by the consortium and Virginia Tech Lomata to justify the development at this site. And I think the most important thing, or among the most important things, is, you know, the traffic studies that will accompany the rezonings, which would actually implement the plan, will have, you know, recommendations for mitigation strategies and things like that. And in fact, that's when we go through the rezoning process, you know, the TIA, the traffic study, that is what we base all, you know, the project specific impacts on. That's what we based all the improvements on and that sort of thing. There was a comment also just about, you know, transit-oriented development actually relieving traffic. That is absolutely certain. And I think it's absolutely critical in terms of metro ridership to be able to capitalize on the investment that we're all making as Fairfax County taxpayers in Metro Rail, in terms of this sort of 3-state compact. And then the last thing I would say too is that in terms of the step down in density from Falls Church, that is where you are seeing the 4.0 FAR. So I mean, some of this is like a quarter of what Falls Church, the city, is doing. But I think we all want to have also, if we're going to have this level of development, we're going to try to reduce the impacts of people getting in cars. We want to have safe crossings of Haycock and Shreve and everything like that. It is important to have the right amount of residential and the right amount of retail and office so that it all feeds off each other and it delivers the quality of residential and retail and restaurants that I think we're all seeking here. So I just wanted to just mention that, just picking up on a couple of themes. But the most important thing is through the rezoning process, the amount of impact is determined. We implement the comprehensive plan through those zonings, and then that is what, you know, we debate consistently with Fairfax County transportation staff, school staff, and everything about what the right amount of, you know, mitigation is for the level of development that we propose through the zoning. So thank you.
David, you know, I would still note though, I mean, if there is a small place to live, the odds of that person having a car is going to be less. So Cheryl gets her her increased people who want to use the metro, right? So if there are more grad students there, there are more people going to the beer garden. If there are more senior people there are more people who are not going to be driving to the driving during rush hour. So it's not just the density, but it's the quality of units there. And I still think that should be considered. And that's and if your area is concerned about traffic, as I understand why they would be, then there would be an interest in your area as well as the rest of our areas to orient the type of people there to the type of people who will use the amenities and use the metro and won't get in a car.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Paul. You're right.
I may his name is just a.
Chris, are you trying to get on? We're not getting good connection to our.
Can you hear me?
It sounds like there may be an issue with your microphone. I don't know if you want to try maybe unplugging it and plugging it back in.
Just a comment if you can hear it. If not,
yeah, we'll try to hear through it.
No, I just echo Cheryl's statement, but who's to say that the city's project is not enough to sustain metro development?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? That last sentence?
Who is to say that the city's project isn't enough to sustain the metros?
Oh, all right. I think that because we're not getting through clear, who is to say that the city's project itself is not enough to sustain the metro? Is that your question? Chris, was that your question?
That was just my comment.
Oh, okay. But I mean, what's your comment though, right? I understood it right through the static.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Anybody else? Brian, I don't know how much you want to go through this. I'm going to call on attendees soon to give them a chance. I mean, I think it's been worthwhile having this debate. I don't know if we're any closer to deciding we want to look at numbers.
Yeah, David, I just want to say if you want to go back, the numbers I presented showed basically what everyone said. Traffic is going to increase in this scenario. We know that. We expect that. The thing that changes with the development, as people noted, if mitigations are in place, you could improve level of service at some of these intersections. So, we owe you a response for the questions that your community raised, and we'll get that to you shortly.
Okay.
But if any of the task force members have concern about that, we're happy to go over that presentation again. It's all online. It's all posted online. And we can talk more about the numbers with you.
Okay. Is it safe to say that if WMATA and Virginia Tech did not get this change, well, maybe not Virginia Tech, but that WMATA at least would still develop the property in all likelihood? I know that's kind of speculative. Maybe WMATA should answer that, but
yeah, it's not really for me to say.
Okay. Well, I asked this about 2 years ago of Steve Tegerman. Yes.
David, this is
Yes.
Darren. Let's take that a step further, and would they be developing something that would be, a net benefit for the community? I guess would be the question. Through this process, we've been able to, put in guidance that we think will enhance the neighborhood, enhance the community, and if they do by right, they can do what they want, and it doesn't go through this type of scrutiny or process. So, that's something that you need, consider as well.
Sure, and that's actually sort of where I was going with that, because if I'm correct, if they just developed it the way it was, they wouldn't have to contribute at all to any of these pedestrian improvements or.
I'm sorry, that's just a red herring.
Correct or not? Okay.
The density by right is much less than what we're developing now. So I mean, that's just a red herring.
Okay. Yeah, I was more asking than stating, because that is worth the comparison if they don't do any of the mitigation. It's hard for me to believe, though, that whatever they ever develop there would not seek to, for example, extend the road, the parallel road coming out of the city to the metro, because why would you not do that? I mean, that strikes me odd that they would say develop it, but deliberately or indifferently cause some sort of a block for people to, for people to get from the city to the, to the metro. I'm going to look at chat a second because I see that. I think Chris said something. Never mind. Okay. No, it's just to me. Don't worry about it. I think he has to leave. Anyway, I know a lot of this is speculative, but anyway, okay. Who else? I could go on with other stuff, and I don't want to be taking up everybody's time. Does anybody else have a question here on the task force? Because if not, I think I'd like to go to attendees of whom at least one person has a question. Can I do that now, Brian? Should I go to the attendee?
Yeah, I guess, related to this discussion, I think people's maybe apprehension about approving the land use numbers here doesn't relate specifically to those numbers. I don't at least, I'd like people to correct me if I'm wrong. It's not, that they don't necessarily want 100, more homes here than, or, what have you. It's about the impacts of that development. Chiefly the transportation impacts and the school's impacts from the sounds of it. And so I think it would be helpful for us to hear is, we've already kind of discussed what exactly those impacts are. About a year ago, we talked about schools impacts. And again, I can provide that information to the task force. And just a few months ago, FC.dot presented about the transportation impacts. And as Cheryl mentioned, for many intersections, comparing the proposed plan with mitigations versus developing as planned, it does actually improve. So I guess for us, it would be helpful to know if there's apprehension about this, what precisely that relates to and what people's, I guess, expectations are, when it comes to, this plan and the impacts. And because I think that's really, that's what people's concerns are related to and what the matter at hand is.
Okay. Brian, if I can, I take it you're just throwing that out there, not expecting responses right now.
Yeah, I mean, if it sounds like this is a conversation we need to continue having at the next task force meeting.
Okay. I would like to give attendees a chance. It's about 8:45. And I see that Cheryl Sim has her hand up. Cheryl, would you like to speak?
Hi. First of all, very interesting conversation. I'm privileged to have heard it. A lot of those concerns mirror mine, but I have three things that I'd like to say. The first is Brian and Ben and Tim, you're going to be meeting with us on Thursday. And Brian, I would really urge you to have a really concrete explanation of students, because we are the neighborhood that surrounds Haycock Elementary School. So that's going to be a really big thing. The second thing I want to raise with you all is crime. And I raise it because the former district head, Alan Hansen of the McLean Police Station, told my husband before he left that he was really concerned about what another mosaic in the McLean Police Station meant in terms of demands on his resources. And I haven't heard any discussion about crime impact, and that's something that's very concerning to my neighborhood. So I would ask you guys to be able to address that on Thursday as well. David, we've had contact with members of your community as well. So we've gotten some information from them. So again, the whole concepts around the additional traffic is really important to us. And then very concretely, Brian, on page 19 on the transportation discussion, if you can go back to page 19 for a second. You know, this goes back to the points that Judy Seif, Nancy, and others and I have made. What is a neighboring community? And again, when we're looking at this whole discussion of transportation, it's all oriented towards Falls Church City, making things walkable to Falls Church City. We're the Fairfax County taxpayers on the other side of I-66. We walk to the metro. We will probably walk to these amenities. Our teenagers and middle schoolers will walk. And I would ask you again to look at that language you have there and consider adding language that goes to the other side of the I-66 overpass on Haycock. And I'll end there, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Cheryl. And actually, it's interesting you raised crime. I haven't heard anybody mention that. But I know from being on the MCA board that, and Darren will second me on this, I think, that when the Metro came to Tyson's, crime rose quite a bit. And I think it taxed their ability to deal with a lot of it. So it's not like that can't happen here. Is there?
If I could,
yeah.
David, if I could just make a comment, Cheryl,
Sure.
thanks for your comments. First of all, I did want to note that on page 9, we do actually have a recommendation to improve pedestrian connectivity, and we do specifically name Haycock Road to Great Falls Street. So we are looking at the area northeast of the metro station. In fact, that's one of the areas you mentioned, the bridge over I-66. It's one of the areas we've kind of focused in on with the active transportation plan, which we're now referring to in the comprehensive plan as well. So that is something that we've noted. Thank you again for bringing it to our attention.
I think you should just be consistent through the document.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. And do you have anything else you want to add? Anybody else want to respond to Cheryl? I don't see any hands up from anybody else among attendees. Do we want to just consider this a good time to end this?
It looks like there is a hand up.
Oh, is there?
Anderson, yeah.
Okay, so I must have just gone up. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, this is Beth Anderson. I'm a task force member with the police, and I did send something to Ben yesterday about our concern with the increased traffic and the crime. That, to Cheryl's point, yes, Captain Hansen was very concerned about the increased traffic. I'm sorry, the increased crime that will come with this huge development. And he was going to speak to that, and the neighborhood watch coordinator, Mario Colorado, there's a new team in there that's not quite up to speed yet on this, but it has been a concern of Fairfax County Police since this project was instituted.
Thank you for the comment.
And Ben, if you could share that information, if possible, with the rest of the members, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think just to close on that note, all of the public safety folks do review the plan amendment, and so fire and the police, as well as schools that we had mentioned earlier, do provide an analysis and a memo that would be included in the staff report, and so we can circulate that memo.
Great, thanks.
Do we have any other attendees who would like to? Oh, Angela Dinkle, hand up. Go ahead, Angela. Angela, you're muted.
Drawing.
Okay, now I hear you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to thank, I'm a resident here at the Villages, and I just want to thank you all for letting me attend tonight.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, I'm not seeing anything else. Last call for questions from attendees. Why don't we just agree to end this now, unless somebody else on the task force has anything else they want to raise at this point?
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
Brian.
so just as a reminder, everybody, the next meeting will be on February 16th at 7 p.m. We can recirculate the information related to the TIA and the transportation impacts before then, as well as the schools impacts that I mentioned earlier. If you have any questions related to any of this in the meantime, feel free to email me or email David, and David can send me your questions.
Right.
We'll be posting the recording of this meeting online ahead of the next meeting, and we'll be in touch next week regarding the meeting agenda. With that, thank you everybody for attending tonight. You all have a good evening, and we'll speak to you all in 2 weeks.
Right, and thank you everybody for participating. Appreciate it. Good night.